Have you ever wondered how life emerges from a single cell? Or how artificial organisms might one day interact with each other? Today, we're diving into a groundbreaking study that uses neural cellular automata, a type of AI that grows 2D organisms from a single seed cell, to explore the mysteries of stability, identity, and emergent behavior. Let's start with the basics. Neural cellular automata, or NCAs, are computational systems that simulate biological growth. You place a single cell on a grid, and through rules encoded in a neural network, it multiplies and differentiates into complex shapes. But here's the problem. These artificial organisms often destabilize. Their boundaries break down, they grow abnormally, like tumors, and it's hard to study how they interact. The researchers behind this study asked, what if we gave these organisms a sense of identity? Their solution: an identity layer in the neural network. Think of it like a unique fingerprint for each cell. By training the NCA to assign a simple value, like 0, 0.5, or 1 to each cell, they created a system where organisms could recognize themselves. The results? Stunning. When multiple NCAs grew close, those with an identity layer stayed stable, unlike the original model, which collapsed into chaos. Even more intriguing, organisms with multiple identity values started to move, adjusting their positions to avoid each other. It's like watching digital cells play a game of tag. But here's the twist: you don't need many identity values. Just one is enough to boost stability. More values. They make the movement more common, almost like a social dance. This isn't just about making pretty shapes. It's about understanding how identity and interaction shape complexity. The team's work opens a door to studying social behavior in artificial life, how cells might cooperate, compete, or even evolve together. And the best part? The code is open source. So who knows? Maybe you'll be the next to experiment with these digital organisms. Thanks for watching. If you're curious about how AI mimics life, hit subscribe. And let me know in the comments, what kind of digital ecosystem would you create? Now let's get technical. The study compared 3 models, A, B, and C, each with different training rules. The goal? To see how these models handle interactions when organisms get close. To measure success, they used RMSE, or root mean square error, a metric that quantifies how far the grown organisms deviate from a perfect, idealized image. Lower numbers mean better performance. But here's the twist: the models didn't just grow independently, they had to adapt when organisms got too close. The team tested 3 lateral distances, 6, 9, and 12 units apart. At each distance, they varied the vertical position of the seed cells, like shifting one organism up or down relative to the other. They then compared the model's errors using statistical tests, like the Mann-Whitney test, to see if differences were meaningful. The results? Big differences. Model C stood out. At distance 9, where the organisms were just close enough to touch, Model C showed significantly higher errors than A and B. But here's what's wild. The errors weren't just about accuracy, they revealed emergent behavior. When organisms grew too close in Model C, they started moving away from each other. Imagine 2 digital creatures deciding to avoid crowding. This wasn't programmed into the model, it emerged from the training. Why? Because Model C was trained to replicate a range of identity values, 0, 0.5, 1, while Model B only used 1. The extra flexibility led to unexpected interactions. Think of it like building with Lego. Model B is a rigid builder that always uses the same block. Model C is a creative builder with a toolbox of different blocks. Sometimes that creativity leads to surprising results, like blocks shifting to avoid clashing. They also found that the starting identity of the seed cells mattered. When seeds had a value of 0, the organisms grew more chaotically. But when they used 0.5 or 1, stability improved. This suggests that the initial identity acts as a blueprint for the organism's behavior. Now here's what's really cool. The team tested a bounding box approach, which tracks cells in an image. But here's the catch: it doesn't distinguish between living organisms and leftover debris, like dead cells or detritus. That's a problem because it skews results. To fix this, they tried scanning a single target, like a gecko-shaped organism, across the scene. But how do you turn that into a single number that tells you how many organisms are alive and growing consistently? It's like trying to count apples in a basket, while the basket keeps changing shape. When they trained these AI systems with a simple rule, giving them a specific identity value during growth, they noticed something unexpected. The organisms started moving away from each other. It's as if they're avoiding collisions, a behavior that hints at emerging individuality. This isn't programmed, it's spontaneous, triggered only when organisms get close. Compare this to other studies where AI organisms followed a gradient, like a food source. Here, the movement arises naturally from proximity, suggesting that even in artificial systems, identity and interaction are linked. The next step: applying a framework called the information theoretic view of individuality to analyze this behavior. But there's a hurdle. When 2 organisms interact, how do you define their environment? It's like trying to track 2 dancers without knowing the music. Looking ahead, the team wants to explore adaptive identities. Think of it as AI organisms developing a sense of self versus not self. This could open doors to studying how cellular interactions might lead to macroscopic awareness, like the basis of consciousness. In the end, this research shows that even a tiny constraint during training, like assigning an identity value, can stabilize growth and spark complex behaviors. Models with this rule, B and C, stayed closer to their intended shapes than the original model, A, and their movement patterns suggest a growing sense of individuality. So what does this mean? It's a step toward understanding how lifelike properties, stability, identity, even awareness, might emerge from simple rules. And as the code is open source, the next breakthrough could come from any curious mind willing to experiment.